Hello everyone, welcome back. So today what we'll be trying to do is what I've done already, but we'll redo it in video. So this is the end result. And the idea for this sketch didn't come from me. On Reddit, I will link down the post in the description below. There is more done to the sketch than what I did in mine, which I think it looks better, this one, than mine. But this is what I originally looked at for the idea of the sketch that we will be doing today, which is this sketch. So every time I refresh, there is a different result. So let me get right into it. So let me just explain the principles behind everything that we'll be doing today on the whiteboard. So we first need to know some basic concepts regarding sine wave or the cosine function, either sine function or cosine function. Both of them should be fine. It wouldn't really matter which one we use. So basically, let's take sine for example. But the sine function, expect a number in here, right? Generally, it's between 0 and 1, but it can be any number really. Normally, you use floating point numbers whenever you pass to the sine function, just because you will want the result of the value that gets returned from this whenever you pass a number that isn't a whole number, right? So basically, I don't remember if it's cos or sine, but either way, it doesn't matter, right? So let's say you have a Cartesian plane, x-axis, y-axis, sorry, never mind, the x-axis over here, and y over here, right? So let's say this is 1, and let's say this is also 1, right? So whenever you provide to sin, let's say the x value of 0, the sine function would return 0, right? If you were to provide 0.5, right? So 0.5 here, right? It would return you basically, in this case, let's say, I believe the sine function returns between -1 and 1. Either way, it doesn't matter. So in this case, 0.5, it would be, let's say, 0.25, right? So about here. And if we were to pass 1, or no, sorry, 0.5 would return you 1, right? And 0.25, if you pass this here, it would return you this over here, right? So essentially what it'll do is it'll return you something like this. And I'm for sure mistaken because I believe it is more like this, right? Anyway, so this is the concept of the sine or cosine function. Both of them are pretty much the same. The only difference is that one starts from 0 and the other one starts from 1, I believe. So it's like this instead. It doesn't matter, actually. For this sketch particularly, it doesn't matter. So what we'll do is, since the sine wave, so basically we have our canvas, right? So we want to start, let's make it simple to begin with. We just want to show a sine function from the middle to middle of the canvas for the x value, right? And we want to start at the top, going to the bottom, something that would look something like this, right? Yeah, basically. So what we have, right? So we have the x, the initial x, right? Being the, well, we can just displace this. The wave, we're going to draw it from here, and we will just displace it by half the width, okay? So the x will be based on the result of this sine function, right? So based on what we pass it, right? So x is going to be the result of the sine function, and we are going to pass to the sine function, right? This is important, right? So we're going to basically have this in a for loop, which goes from 0 to the height of the canvas. So this loop goes from 0 to the height, and we do I++, let's say, for each iteration. Like I said, we want the values in between the two integers. So it's not a good idea to just pass I in here, right? Because we'll always get pretty much the same point on the line. So what we'll do is we'll map. So here I'll just draw it narrow. So we'll basically map I, which goes between 0 and the height, to, and then we can have, so this would be one integer value, right? So do we want to see one integer value here, right? So one wave each side, or do we want a little bit more of this, right? So I'm thinking we could use we could start from 0 or from any random number, right? But let's just say for the sake of this example here, that the explanation will start from 0, and let's say we want to map it to 1 or 1.5, so that it does this, right? Maybe 1.5, right? So this is what will pass to the sine function. It's going to return x. Though the issue here, well, it's not really an issue, but the thing is that it's also going to look just like a straight line if we were to plot x at the x value that got returned, because the sine return value is pretty much between, like we said, well, I believe it's -1 and 1. It might be 0 and 1. It doesn't matter. It's a really small amount, right? I believe it is -1 and 1. Anyway. So it's a really small value, right? So it would just oscillate between 1 pixel, 2 pixel in total, right? So it's not really visually pleasing just to see a line, right? So what we'll do is we can just multiply it. So x multiplied by I don't know, let's say 30. So 30, right? So it would go 30 to there and 30 to there, right? And then afterwards we need, like we said, it's going to draw it here. We need to displace it to the middle of the canvas, right? So the width, dth divided by 2, right? So that's pretty much how you draw one sine wave. And then what we can do to get the effect that we wanted is that there is multiple sine wave with a little offset, right? So looks like this, right? And we have a bit more, right? So it looks like this, right? So this is like, so we basically can do another loop, which loops this and changes the over here, this, it would just basically add, let's say 0.1 to it. So that it's starting the wave sign, the sine wave function at a just a small offset of difference, right? So that we can see really the different sine wave results. So that's pretty much how you do the sine wave. After this, there's just the circle under it. Pretty much just drawing a circle on the screen. That's not too bad. But yeah, so let's get started with this. Let me share my screen. Okay, so I'll remove everything apart from the colors, just because I don't have time right now to just look up new colors. So we'll be using those colors. Feel free to use different ones or the same ones. It really doesn't matter. So let's start with the background. Not really complicated, right? Background. And we will use the background color. Background color, great. So I know it doesn't seem like we did anything, but there is a background color. Whoa, no, never mind. There is a background color right here. Right, we can see the difference. Okay, so this is our background color. Awesome, great. We haven't done anything. Let's first start with one sine wave in the middle, right? So, like we said, we'll get const. And like I said on the whiteboard, let me get back to this. Over here, right? So I want this value to be a random number because I don't want them to all start like at the same curve. So I'm going to make this number be not 0 necessarily, but a random value between, let's say, 0 and 100. It could be smaller than 100 actually, but it doesn't matter, between 0 and 100. And this value, I'm also going to do something different. I'm going to say this value, the start value, plus or minus a random value between, let's say, 1 and or 2 and 3. Let's say that really I don't want a big change, a big gap. Okay, great. So we'll have const start equals, like we said, random between 0 and 100. But like I said, it doesn't need to be 100. I'm just making it 100. It could be like 10. I believe it would make no difference, or really such small difference we wouldn't see it. So the end, basically angle that we pass to the sign value would be start plus and then random. And we can say random between 1 and, let's say, 3, right? We'll see if that's too much or too little, right? We want to see multiple curvature inside of here, right? So now we'll do a for loop that goes from I0 to I being the height of the canvas. And every time we do that, we will get the value. So const value, and this value variable will be the value that we pass to the sign function, right? So like we said, we're going to map I, which goes from 0 to the height, to our start and the end values. And then we can just get the x value. X will be equal to the sign of that value. Great. And then we want to time it by, let's say const. Let's create a constant for that. So we can have const, let's say amplitude. And we could have a random value for that as well, like between 30, let's say, and well, minus, yeah, 30 is fine, 30 and 50, let's say. Or it could be a fixed value. That really shouldn't matter that much. So times that, and then we want to displace all of this by width divided by 2, right? Okay, so we've got the x, and the y is just I, so I'll rename I for y, so it'll be easier for us to understand it. Great, so instead of I, let's just use y. Great. Okay, so now let's just draw a point. And before drawing the point, let me do something like stroke, and then config.stroke color. Great. Okay, awesome. Okay, perfect. Let me make sure it's still recording properly. Yeah. Okay, great. We're already at 12 minutes. It's going pretty quick. In terms of the time is passing faster than I thought. So x and y. So that's okay. There we go. So we've got our sign function. Let me make the stroke weight a little bit bigger. Maybe 3 is fine. There we go. Okay, so I feel like there's not enough curve, right? As we can see, right? So maybe end I wanted to start at 3 and go up to 5, right? Okay, good. So now we have between 3 and 5 difference between, okay, so let's do a little bit more. Between 5 and, let's say, 8. There we go. So we've got more curves inside of here, right? Let's say 10. Okay, I think this looks good. So we've got our line that we wanted. Great, awesome. Right now it's made of points. Eventually we can create just a quick function to calculate x based on the y value, right? With a start and an amplitude. Great. And what we'll do is basically do exactly this, and it'll return that value, that x value. Okay, great. Okay, so we can just copy this. We can remove all of this. Okay, great. And then let's just get const x equals this. This we pass the y, the start, and the end with the amplitude. Okay, great. We should get the same result right now. Amplitude is not used because it's called amplitude in here. There you go. Okay, so we get the same result. That's awesome. So what I want to do, instead of doing this over here, instead of doing a point, let me do a line, and let me get x1, and we'll get x2. X2 will basically be the next y, so plus 1, right? That's pretty straightforward. And then we'll do y, that's fine. Y plus plus is fine, I think. Okay, and then we'll do a line that goes between x1, y, x2, y plus 1. Okay, there we go. So now there's no visual changes, but this is using lines instead of points. So maybe I want kind of a different result. But anyway, that's all good. So now I want to draw multiple of these with a different basically offsetted start and end, basically. So what we can do is just do a loop. So let's say for let I equals 0, I is less than, and let's do an amount. So const amount equal, let's say for right now, let's say 6. Okay, so I'll draw 6 lines, 6 sine wave lines with a small offset. So we'll have amount here and I plus plus, great. Okay. Let me just format. Okay, there we go. So what we'll do here is instead of start and end, we'll have const offset be equal to the map of, I want really like a pretty small offset. So I want to map I, which goes between 0 and amount, to let's say 0 and between, so for the 6th, I want maybe 3. We'll see. Maybe that's too much. Maybe 2, right? So we'll use offset to add to the start, and we'll just have like const s for start, which will be start plus the offset, and we'll have const e for end and plus the offset again, and then we'll just use s and e instead of start and end, s and e, right? Where am I? Where am I at? Okay, e, there we go. Okay, great. There we go. So we have pretty much what we wanted. Maybe it's a bit too much too, right? I'll put it to 1. Maybe 1 is not enough, maybe 1.5, right? That's a little bit better, maybe 1.3. Okay, that's good with me. Great. So what I want also is maybe instead of 1.3, I want minus 1.3, right? So for it to go the other way around. So I'll have like a const negative and or molt, whatever we want to call it. It doesn't really matter. And I'll just do random between 0 and 1 whenever this value is greater than 0.5. So half of the time, about half of the time, we'll have minus 1. Otherwise, we'll have 1. And here we can just do this times the molt. So now it'll either offset it this way or offset it the other way, right? Yeah, so we get different results. Okay, that's good. So now what I want to do is also change the stroke weight between those strokes, right? So I want maybe the stroke weight to be 3 whenever it's the first line we draw, and maybe 0 to the last line, right? So what we can do here is stroke weight and then map again between I, which goes between 0 and the amount, to maybe let's say 4 and 0, right? Right. So it's fading off, right? As it's as we're doing the lines. So that's good with me. So now we can just move all of this into its own function, right? We could have function sine with an e, because sine is already taken, as we can see from our utilization in here. So let's not call it the same thing. So we can call sine now. And what I want to do is also make, so right now I just drawn it in the middle of the time. That was just for the example. So what I want to do now is basically change the amplitude, sorry, not the amplitude, but the offset. We can call this. So we'll pass to calculate x some. Well, let's call this. Let's pass x, right? So x will be like the original x that we added to here, right? So right now it's +2 right now. Okay. So here calculate x. So we'll have like a const random. So we'll have const x equal random between maybe 0 and the width. Okay, great. And now we can just pass x to this. Now it should be randomly, it should be drawing the sine wave pretty much anywhere on the width, right? So if I refresh, it's not in the middle only now. It's pretty much anywhere, right? I can refresh many times. It's going to appear pretty much anywhere. Okay, great. So now we have our function sine, right? So I want multiple sine waves to be drawn. So let's do a for loop. And we have config here. We could have like signs, and this signs count, right? And this would be let's say like 6 or 7 right now. Yeah, sure, why not? So we'll have let I equals 0. I is less than config dot this. Okay. I plus plus, great. And now we can just call sign that amount of time, right? There we go. So now every time we refresh, we have 7 new sine wave lines getting drawn. So that's great. We're pretty much done, right? Well, not so much, right? We'll see, but not that much. We're almost there, but not exactly. So let's draw. So okay, great. So now let's draw. Let me mute this. Okay, let's draw the circle. And since the circle is going behind the sine wave, we'll draw the circle first in the code, and then it'll pass through the sine wave functions and call it, right? So we'll have a random position. That's what I'm thinking. So we'll have like const position equal create vector. And I want a random, like the center of the circle should be randomly selected between in the screen. We'll have the radius set in here. Maybe a radius of like 200 is fine. So we'll have radius in there. The position should be like random between I want to leave a gap between the space around. So let me do something. Let me do margin. Let me do like margin 50, and this margin value will be used. We will use it at least to draw from let's say here, right? I want to leave the borders untouched, basically. So what I'll do is I'll do map I, which goes between 0 and the amount. That's fine. Map I, that's also fine. And here, right, I'll do height minus the margin, and y should start at the margin, right? Let me mute again. I keep touching it, right? Okay, that's great. And this is going to be going between oh, and it's config, not just margin. Config.margin and height minus config.margin, right? So this is the same thing that we need to do over here, right? It's not just margin, it's config.margin. Great. So it does seem to go on the sides, but that's just because the sine wave itself starts here, but the other ones are going over it, right? So what we could do possibly is just like we could draw afterwards. We could draw just a white or with the background color, just rectangles around the sides. So I'm fine with that. So what we'll do now, like we said, the circle. So position between not 0, but the config.margin plus I want the radius of the circle. Radius. Config.radius. Great. And now for the other edges would be the width minus config.margin minus config.radius, right? right? I mean, we're not seeing the circle right now, which makes sense. And now we want also the y to also be random between, so I'm at 25 minutes right now. Let's go. Time is moving fast, I have to say. We'll just copy this random over here, over here, right? Let me scroll. Okay, that's good. The only thing we want to change is height over here. Great. Now let's set the fill, right? So here we'll say no fill. I mean, it wouldn't change much, but I like to put it there. So here we'll have fill, and we'll fill with the stroke color. So config dot stroke color, and we'll also have the stroke be config dot stroke. Well, let's not put the stroke right now. It doesn't matter. Let's do no stroke even, just for the moment. Let's do a circle at pos.x, pos.y with a diameter of config.radius times 2. Right, there you go. So we have our circle. If we notice, right, there is something in here, right, where we can see that the lines, the sine wave lines that are going over the circle are the same as the background color. So that's why we're not seeing ours right now. So what we can do, right, we know the position of the circle. We can just check in the sine function. I know it's not great. I mean, we could just move this into here. It really doesn't matter that much. I'll move it in there, but eventually we might not want to have it in there. So who knows? Right now I'll leave it in here. That's fine. Okay. So what we want to do is basically check if, let's say, x1 y1 is inside the circle. If it is, change the stroke. Okay. So great. So by default, the stroke should be this. So by default here, the stroke should be that. And otherwise, so if and I'll need to move this after at least x1. So if x1, so let me do, I'll use the distance function from P5. It's pretty much just making the distance well, to calculate distance in a 2D environment, right? Let me go back to the whiteboard, try to explain it real quick. So let's say you have your canvas here. Let's say you have a point here, a point here. The distance really between those points is this distance here, right? So it's this has, let's say, x equals let's say 3, and y equals, let's say 4, right? From 0, 0 being here, right? Normally on the canvas it's 0, 0 here, but for the sake of the example, it's there. Okay. Parentheses. Okay, and this one is, let's say it's 6 across, and let's say it's 7 up, right? So to get the distance, it's basically this one minus this one. Never mind. Sorry, we need to get this here, right? So this distance is the square. The square, it's basically c squared. This is a squared. This is b squared. And we basically need to make the square root of those minus this. Hopefully that wasn't, well, hopefully it was clear, but not the best to explain. But we could always check the specific what it does under it, under the code, right? But under the function. But okay. Anyway, so we need the distance between the pos.x, pos.y, right? Between the center of the circle and the current point we're on, right? So between x1 and y. And if that distance is smaller than the radius, then we need to change the stroke to the same stroke as the same color as the background, right? So let me copy this and let me do here. stroke, like this. Great. There we go. So we pretty much are done. The only other differences I've done in the other sketch was to add a contour line around the margin. So let's do that. Let's also make this margin, the two on the left side, left and right side, on the horizontal axis, just some rectangles, just not to show anything, right? So let's do no stroke. No stroke. Let's do fill, and we will fill with the same background color. There we go. And we will draw a rectangle, which starts from, in this case, 0, 0, and goes to the config.margin in terms of how thick it is, and it goes to the height. Okay, great. So we have the left one. Now let's do the right one, which will be starting at the width minus the margin. Started at 0, that's fine, and then it's this size. Yeah, that's good. And now let's just do lines. So let's do stroke, and we'll have the stroke be this stroke, the stroke color. Whether yeah, sure. Stroke color, and we'll have 4 lines. So the first one starts at the margin x, xy, right, and goes to the width dth minus the margin, and no, sorry, yes, and the height should just be the margin, right? So we have our first one. Let me also do stroke weight, just so it's a little bit thicker, right? So let's do maybe 3, right? Let's see if that's enough, or if that's visible enough for us. That's good to me. Let's do 3 more lines. So next one should be starting at basically width minus margin. This is fine, and it's going to go to width minus margin, and this is going to be height minus margin. Right, there we go. All right, now let's do the bottom one. Let's start it from the, it doesn't matter. Let's start it from the bottom right corner, right? So it's the width minus the margin, and the height minus the margin, and it goes to the margin and to the same height, so the height minus the margin, right? There you go. And now let's do our fourth line. We could start it from 0, 0, or we could make it go to 0, 0, but it's basically going to be exactly this point. To the margin point, I think. Yeah, there we go. So we're pretty much done. The only last other difference I've made is I've added random points pretty much everywhere on the canvas. So we can do that. Let me do the points just after the circle. So for let I is equal to 0, I is less than, let's say, like 4,000 points. I plus plus, there you go. We'll select a random position, right? So so we'll do pause const p, because pause, well, we could do just point at random between 0 and the width, or we could do a margin, right? That would be a little bit better. Config.margin, it wouldn't change much since we're already drawing on those margin. Okay, config.margin to the width minus config.margin, right? Okay, that's good. Now we need the y, which should be also random between config.margin and sorry, I never stopped using I need to stop that. Config d.margin as well, right? That oh god. Okay, let me do the stroke color, which should be I have it above dots color, right? So it's a little bit darker than the actual background. Config dot There you go. And let's do a different stroke weight between, and maybe I want to also set the stroke to have like an alpha, a random alpha between, let's say, 100 and 255, which is the maximum opacity, right? And let's do a stroke weight also random between, let's say, 2 and 4. What is the issue now? Let me see the console. Okay, it's just loading indefinitely. Let me close this. Let me open up a new one. There we go. Great. So we now have our points a bit everywhere on the canvas. I think it looks good. We can always change the color. Let me pick this color, for example. Sorry. This color, right? This color is 103, 99, 175. No, 152. 103, 99, 152, right? So let's see this. There we go. Now we have this color. So that's pretty much the sketch for today. Hopefully you liked it, enjoyed it. The code will be down in the description down below. Try to implement whatever this guy did. I'll link the Reddit post down below. There's not much explanation on how he did it, but hopefully you can make something also with the shadow kind of under the circle, right? You see this over here, some kind of cloudy stuff. There's some dripping also under the circle. Hopefully you can try something like this. So I'll leave, and also if you take a look at the margin lines, right? They're not exactly lines; they're more like segments of line put together. So that's also an option you could try to do. But hopefully it was creative enough for you. You can make something from this. Try anything you want. Hopefully you like the video. Talk to you in the next one. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.